You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Haristodoulou.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to more of the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristodoulou, and today on this July 26, 2022, we are going to continue on ranking teams within their division during my divisional power ranking series as we discuss the NFC West. We are just now a little over a week away until preseason action kicks off with the Hall of Fame game between the Jaguars and Raiders. I'm super excited. This is one of my favorite times of year. Speculation for every single team is rife as everyone's coming into training camp talking about how great their team looks going into the preseason and how everyone feels like this is their year. So we're ranking each team within their division. And again, today the NFC West will go from 4 to 1 and talk all of them, why I have them positioned where they are. And I would love to hear what you guys think in the comment section down below. So make sure you weigh in, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out, because when we cross 500 subs, I'm giving away some show t-shirts to you guys, my Greeks Gridiron fans. So without further ado, we'll start with number 4 and work our way up from the top. And at the bottom of the NFC West, I will say that I think this division is a little more cut and dry than some of the other ones. There is a little bit of, I would say, discrepancy at like the 2 and 3 spot, but overall, I feel like this division is kind of set in stone, at least heading into training camp and the preseason, barring any big trade or anything like that. But at the number 4 spot, I'm going to have to go with the Seattle Seahawks. I just think the amount of losses that they've taken within this, past free agency, it kind of outweighs the gains. Now, I will say this, out of every draft class, the Seahawks probably have my favorite one in the NFC West. You got guys like offensive tackle Charles Cross, edge rusher Boye Mafe, running back Kenneth Walker III, offensive tackle Abraham Lucas, cornerback Tariq Woolen. Like, the list goes on for the Seattle Seahawks. They brought in a ton of youthful talent and, of course, traded away Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos for tight ends Noah Fant and some picks. I just think that losing someone like Russell Wilson and a defensive leader in Bobby Wagner on the other side of the football, safety DJ Reed, you lost tight end Gerald Everett, who is probably the best tight end you've had in some time, other than like that one little stretch of Will Disley having a solid stretch of games before he went down with injury, and that was kind of it for him. Again, a ton of losses with a lot of upside coming in, don't get me wrong, but when your quarterback battle is Drew Lock and Geno Smith, I don't really know if I can sit here and say that the Seahawks should be any higher than number 4. I'm really excited to see what a lot of these young guys do for this team. I'm curious to see what Pete Carroll can do with either of these two quarterbacks. Geno Smith did not look bad when he was in relief for Russell Wilson last year, so some positives to kind of look at with the team overall, but this is more of this is a rebuild year. I'm looking forward to seeing how Kenneth Walker fits into the mold. While I love Chris Carson, the injuries have just been a problem, and we don't really even know if he's going to be taking another snap for the Seattle Seahawks at this point with the injury history he's had. And I'm really excited to see how Boye Mafe and Charles Cross end up fitting in on their sides of the football, respectively. Like I said, this is probably my favorite draft class of the entire NFC West. And there's a lot to look forward to. Tariq Woolen is another guy. You guys have so many people in your draft class that I looked at and talked, I feel like, about a little bit more at length, just as guys I really liked going into the draft. And so Seattle has a lot to look forward to, just not really quite their year this year. Coming into the number 3 spot, and like I said, there was a little bit of just mulling over and trying to decide who I wanted to fit in at the 2 and 3 spot here. And coming in at the number 3, I think I'm going to settle with the Arizona Cardinals. Now, I was tempted to put them at number 2 because they are more solidified at the quarterback spot now, knowing that Kyler Murray is locked in on a long-term deal. However, I can't ignore the conversation that's kind of going on right now regarding a stipulation that popped up in Kyler Murray's deal, requiring him to have to study a minimum of 4 hours a week within his contract is one of the more interesting types of verbiage to come out of a contract in some time. And coupling that with the quote from 2021 where he says he's basically the type of person that's not going to kill themselves over, watching tape and studying film from the other team. He's more of an instinctual guy, and he just kind of sees everything on the field and makes it happen while it's going on. I can't ignore that. That is definitely a slight red flag, but overall, you can't deny how good Kyler Murray is at his peak. He's been an awesome quarterback when things are going really well. Now, they're going to start off with the suspension of DeAndre Hopkins. He's going to miss 6 games. That is somewhat mitigated with Marquise Brown having been traded for the Cardinals. So there is, there's negatives and positives kind of counteracting each other here, where you're worried about Kyler Murray's tape study. You can think about, well, he is an awesome player when things are going really well. Marquise Brown is there to kind of, supplement for DeAndre Hopkins. And then when Hopkins comes back, this offense, the sky could be the limit here. They did lose Chase Edmonds, though, their running back. And I know that, don't get me wrong. I know Connor popped off all last season. I was well aware of what he was doing, and I don't think he got quite the love he deserved for how much he was able to do with this offense here. But I just think that overall, there's some losses here on the defensive side of the football as well. You lose Chandler Jones and, a big question mark of can J.J. Watt, put together a healthy season for you guys after signing a big 3-year deal last year and making a difference on the defense in the short time he was there, but can we get it for the whole season? There's just some cause for concern. Christian Kirk is also gone. Jordan Hicks is also gone. And you look at the free agency class, and I understand teams aren't built and won and lost in free agency, but like Nick Vigil, Ezekiel Turner, Will Hernandez, AJ Green was re-signed. Not really a ton to write home about with the free agent class, and a little bit bare bones when you're looking at the draft class as well. While I think Trey McBride is an interesting prospect at the tight end spot, and Deon Cameron Thomas is somebody I'm looking forward to seeing on the team as well. Myjai Sanders, I almost said his name wrong. Myjai Sanders is another person as well on the edge there. Just not enough upside for some of the downside I feel like that has come out of the Cardinals this year. Could they slip and be sneak in and be the number 2 team? Sure, potentially. But I think my number 2 team has them edged out just a tiny bit. Now, going into the number 2 spot, and probably the biggest reason why I had such a hard time putting them at number 2 is because this team does have a massive question mark at the quarterback spot. And we're talking the San Francisco 49ers. I understand that, the word is out. Jimmy Garoppolo has been allowed to seek a trade deal with all the other teams in the league. His agent is working right now to see if they can find a potential suitor. And I've heard the rumors that Seattle might be the team to go for him. And if he does go to Seattle, which an in-division trade like that, kind of a head scratcher. Do I think that ends up happening? Maybe. I mean, it's not the first time this offseason we see an in-division trade. We saw the Dolphins send Devontae Parker over to the Patriots earlier in the offseason. I just don't know if that would make sense. If you're the 49ers, why would you send your quarterback unless you really you're not worried about Jimmy Garoppolo as a threat? Why would you send him to a division rival? You also look at the compensation that the Browns got for Baker Mayfield. I would argue that despite the fact Jimmy Garoppolo has made it to the Super Bowl and has been in some pretty big games in his career so far, they're comparable. And you can get a 5th round or 6th round pick from somebody else. It doesn't have to be Seattle. Don't send him within your division. That's just a head scratching move. But I mean, if Seattle's the only suitor, Seattle's the only suitor, what are you going to do, But there are some exciting things about this team. Aside from, is Trey Lance going to be able to take over the reins and run this offense the way Mike Shanahan wants it to? You look at some of the draftees, the investment in the defensive line that this team has committed to for the last, honestly, since John Lynch has gotten there. Edge rusher Drake Jackson, running back Tyrion Davis-Price is an exciting guy to go into that running back room. The magic they work with, it feels like with all the running backs over there in San Francisco, no matter who you plug in, you can get production from them with the way Kyle Shanahan draws things up on offense. Wide receiver Danny Gray is another wild card from the draft class. I'm interested in seeing how he performs for the team as well. And then some of the free agent signings. Cornerback Charvarius Ward is going to be a huge piece for this secondary to help improve a defense that was already kind of a problem for a lot of teams and is only going to continue to look to get better. But with that, there is a couple of free agent losses that do concern me. Laken Tomlinson, one of the better guards in the league, one of the best pulling guards in the league, definitely a tough guy to replace, not someone you're just going to kind of plug in and replace immediately. Defensive tackle DJ Jones might not be a household name, but he was a guy up in the middle there that, did some work here and there and had solid production for the 49ers. I like them at number 2. I think my biggest question mark really for this team, and it's kind of a big one, but they have so much talent around the position, is how is the quarterback spot going to look with Trey Lance under center? And also, another thing that's not really getting talked about, and while I do at times, I am of the belief that while the offensive coordinator position is important for the offense, and I think it's paramount to have stability in the coaching staff, the best quarterbacks can stand above the offensive coordinator And we've seen that with some of the best quarterbacks in the league, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady. They are literally the offensive minds of their system at times. And Aaron Rodgers would be another example there. But I'm not so worried about it, but I'm interested to see how the offense looks now that Mike McDaniel is gone. But overall, I like all the pieces in San Francisco. Ultimately, if the quarterback, this team kind of lives and dies at the quarterback spot, I would say. Defense is really good. Offensive line has lost a piece, but ultimately they still got the best left tackle in the league and a still really solid unit up front. If they can get even just solid production from Lankinson's replacement, and if Trey Lance can just hold down the fort, offense is still Mike Shanahan's system there, or Kyle Shanahan, not Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan. I think that the 49ers have a really good spot to be in contention for a playoff spot and definitely fighting for the number one spot should my number one team in, drumroll as if it's a surprise, the LA Rams potentially take a step back. Now, the LA Rams, I have a hard time really knocking them at all out of the number one spot, just because with anything they lost, they kind of mitigated and replaced with something else. You obviously lose out on Von Miller, who was probably one of the bigger reasons that isn't named Aaron Donald why that defense was as good as it was. I think it's no coincidence that Von Miller having a massive postseason kind of helped the Broncos and elevate them to a Super Bowl just a handful of years back, and then kind of does the same thing during the playoffs again for the Rams. It's not really a coincidence. I would say he is a key role and factor in both those teams winning Super Bowls. But you replace him with Bobby Wagner, who, I don't really understand how the Seahawks opted to just let him go. I understand it's kind of a rebuild mode now for Seattle, but Bobby Wagner's still got the juice, man. Like, I just cannot believe that they let him walk like that. So no surprise he goes to LA, hometown, rival. I don't know if he said it doesn't really affect anything, but at the same time, there's got to be a little bit of a piece of him that wants to be able to give it to Seattle a couple times a year for the remaining time in his career, especially on a Super Bowl contender like the Rams. The question mark remains around Odell Beckham Jr. Did they end up bringing him back? Obviously, they bring in wide receiver Allen Robinson, and while, Allen Robinson and Odell Beckham Jr. are not the same wide receiver at all, it's kind of like a swap in, swap out type deal in terms of they're both very talented wide receivers. You can argue who is more talented, and they're both somewhat age-wise similar in their stage of their careers, but imagine a scenario where, because they don't have Robert Woods anymore, imagine a scenario where, week 8, they're bringing back Odell Beckham Jr., you got Allen Robinson, and you have yourself Cooper Kupp as a wide receiver trio over there. Like, my goodness, would that be an absolute problem? I can only imagine how good this Rams team would have been if they didn't end up losing Robert Woods as soon as they brought in Odell Beckham. It probably would have been a blowout in the NFC. I'm not going to lie. With how good the Rams were last year, minus Robert Woods offensively, if he was there taking looks away and drawing coverage, because Robert Woods was no slouch when he was playing really well. If he's taking coverage away from Cooper Kupp and Odell Beckham Jr. and things are just wide open for them to, dink and dunk and dime left and right all over the field, I can't imagine the problem. Now you have Allen Robinson, big wide receiver, go up, make the jump ball type catch. If you get Odell Beckham back in the fold there, God, that would be ridiculous. There's just a lot to be excited about with the Rams. Matthew Stafford's there. He got his extension, another year in the system. I think Sean McVay really needs to focus on taking the pressure off of Matthew Stafford. He spent so many years in the Lions, literally dragging that team on his back. He needs to know now that you have Cam Akers coming back. You're going to have a solid running game. This is going to be a more balanced unit, I believe, going into the next season. And he talked about that during their playoff run, and it definitely showed at times. I think that in terms of avoidable turnovers, there are a few that kind of stand out during the Rams playoff run, but not as many as you saw during the season and the stretch of that entire 17-game year. When we went to the playoffs, the only real interception that really stands out to me was the one to Jaquiski Tartt in that game against the 49ers. But other than that, Matthew Stafford had a fairly good showing protecting the ball. If he can continue to improve on that, and again, you don't need to force crazy plays. Stafford is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I think he's a top 5 guy. He can make every throw that any quarterback needs to make. The no-look stuff, the put him in the tight windows, the over-the-shoulder, back corner, end zone fades, whatever you need it to be, he can do it all. Cam Akers coming back, the potential that Odell Beckham's going to be there, and whether or not he's going to be there, I think this offense could still be a formidable unit at that. There's just very limited losses with really good gains. Logan Bruss will replace the Austin Corbett loss. Sebastian Joseph Day on the defensive line is definitely something that they're going to miss because Sebastian Joseph Day was a low-key, unsung hero for the run game for the Rams during the stretch run. Darius Williams is another guy they'll be missing in the secondary as well. We'll have to look at guys like Jacoby Durant and some other dudes to maybe try to replace the production there because I thought Darius Williams at times was really good but also got exposed. But you have to look at some of the younger guys that they brought in through the draft to fill in some holes, but ultimately the core of this team is still there. I'm curious to see, out of everything that's gone on with the Rams offseason, how does the Von Miller for Bobby Wagner type swap kind of affect this team? Is that like a exact trade-off is what I'm curious to see. I think Bobby Wagner still has the juice. I think Von Miller, a lot of people were surprised he got the money he did. Listen, James Harrison, he was playing, I think he played till what? He was 37, 38. He was an absolute monster up until he retired. He was still getting it done on the Patriots. If people remember that was going on at one point during his career. He played for the Bengals and the Patriots. Von Miller is going to be doing his thing for a while. I don't really see him slowing down. He seems like he's, well in his prime, despite his age of 33. I'm curious to see if Bobby Wagner is still at that point. Some people have brought it up that he's not quite the spring chicken he used to be, but I think Bobby Wagner still brings a lot of oomph to the table, and I think he will be serviceable, but I'm curious to see what kind of a trade-off that is, and if one piece equals the other in terms of the swap of losing one and bringing in the other. But that is my NFC West power rankings. I would love to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I appreciate you guys for watching. As always, I will see you all in the next video. Have a good one.